I just realized that we were not even on the air there. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Weird with Webster. I am your host, Jackson Webster. Alongside me is Aidan Hansen. And sorry for that. I needed to press a few buttons, but we got it figured out. And yeah, so Aidan, how you doing?
I'm good.
So after that mess up, sorry about that, everyone. But I'm sure it was better than whatever song was playing. Sorry, but no offense to the song. But there's been a lot to talk about here in sports this week. A lot of baseball news, especially out of the Baseball Hall of Fame, and that's history. That's history to me because that's where baseball preserves its history, and a lot of people do not think that they have been doing that right.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know. Well, like in the whole lockout situation, I think MLB is just in a bad rap in general. I don't know. They fired like one of their best writers, Ken Rosenthal. I mean, I don't know. It's just a crapshoot over there.
It really is because we see David Ortiz get into the Hall of Fame. He's voted in on Tuesday, and I don't think that's who a lot of people were hoping for. Barry Bonds, Roger Clemens, a lot of really talented ball players did not make the Hall of Fame this weekend. What was your reaction to those Hall of Famers not making it?
I was just annoyed. I don't know. You have David Ortiz, the only person elected into the Hall of Fame this year, the only one. And yeah, he's a great player and everything like that, but at the same time, like, I wish Bonds would have been able to get in there. I wish Roger Clemens would have been able to get in there. And I don't know. I'm a Curt Schilling fan because I'm a Diamondbacks fan. But so
I'm also a Curt Schilling fan. He was on the 1993 Phillies team that went to the World Series, and I understand his sort of speech it's unacceptable, really. And part of the Hall of Fame criteria is basing it on character. Schilling did not have that character, and that's the argument that you can make with Bonds, Clemens. Even Sammy Sosa, he's out of there too. I mean, it was his 10th year. So those three guys, I mean, two of them who were just massive home run hitters and the all-time leader in Cy Youngs are not going to be enshrined in your Hall of Fame. Does that make the Hall of Fame invalid to you?
Well, yeah, because in every other sport, I mean, you guys have you have guys in other sports that are in the Hall of Fame that didn't have great personalities. You have Terrell Owens. You have Adrian Dantley. Actually, I don't know if he's in the Hall of Fame for NBA, but he should, in my opinion. I don't know. You just have guys that just have terrible personalities that are still in the Hall of Fame. I don't know. It's just weird to me. And you have like Steve Smith Sr. for the NFL, who's like one of the best wide receivers, and he didn't get along very well with a lot of his teams and stuff. So I don't know, it just annoys me. You gotta put dudes in the Hall of Fame who have the numbers and who are that important to baseball history.
Now, a lot of people have been saying David Ortiz is a controversial subject to get into the Hall of Fame because of the 2009 report that said he was on steroids that came out. And just because of his relationship with the media is why he got in. That's very controversial in itself. And, Bonds and Clemens did not have that sort of great relationship with the media too, but then you could argue, Bonds is one of the greatest DHs of all time, and to that I say Edgar Martinez and Frank Thomas would like to have a talk. But Ortiz, no doubt about it, is the best clutch hitter in baseball history. I mean, the man came up huge in so many situations for the Red Sox throughout the years, but there is that lingering test that he took. So if you're going to have some players that are in the Hall of Fame that took steroids and others not, where do you draw the line here?
Well, I saw this a lot on Twitter, and I think that my opinion coincides with them as well, because, like, Ortiz tested positive, gets in. Barry Bonds, I don't believe, ever tested positive, and he doesn't get in. And the thing is, too, is that, like, Barry Bonds and Sammy Sosa and, like, all those dudes in the 90s that took steroids in the late 90s, and like along with like the Yankees and stuff, like those entities like saved baseball in my opinion. Like for basketball, you have like Magic and Bird coming in the 80s and saving basketball, and then you have like Yarmer Yager with the NHL and like him after Wayne Gretzky and all that stuff, and then you have like Alex Ovechkin. Like there are reasons that there are players that some people think are reasons to still watch the sport, and I think that in the early 2000s and that in the late 90s, Barry Bonds is one of those people.
You can make that argument. It's tough for me to disagree with that argument, but to the baseball fan who's kind of a baseball purist, I mean, I sit here and talk about history. It's tough for me to say, oh, these guys should get in when they've made a mockery of the sport. I believe Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. I've seen him in Vegas, which is not helping his case, by the way, but he's the all-time leader in hits, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. Bonds is the all-time leader in home runs. Hank Aaron is really the all-time leader in my opinion. But it's tough. It's tough to walk a line, and you have to write that on the plaque if they do ever get in. I eventually believe the Veterans Committee will vote these guys in. I don't think you can tell the history of baseball without them. And to your point, in the 90s, yes, they were huge. But there are also 29 other Hall of Famers, Tony Gwynn, Ken Griffey Jr., just to name a few, from the 90s that were pivotal. I mean, Jr., I think, had the greatest impact, and that's what I believe led Bonds to, his head size. It's never been proven he's tested positive, but his head size grew to like size 8. You see the size 8 hats on the rack at the stadiums. They're going for like $10 because no one has a size 8 head unless you are just a freak of nature, and that's what Barry Bonds turned himself into, perhaps because of the way Griffey was hitting home runs and doing it naturally. I think he was jealous at some point there. But as we look at the other Hall of Famers who did not get in either, Todd Helton. Would you say Todd Helton is a Hall of Famer? Do you remember him at all?
Who did he play for?
He played for the Colorado Rockies.
Those like early 2000s teams before like what's his name? He was with them in 2008. Rockies.
I'm not sure, but Troy Tulowitzki?
Yeah,
yes,
Tulowitzki. Yeah.
And then you also had Larry Walker get into the Hall of Fame too. He got in last year. So I personally believe Todd Helton is a Hall of Famer. Then you also look at some of the other ones here: Billy Wagner, Andrew Jones, Gary Sheffield, who hit over 500 home runs. That's almost a lock for the Hall of Fame. And Gary Sheffield only got, let's see here, 40% of the vote. What's your reaction to that?
I don't know. I think writers were in a really tough position because, like, how they saw it is that, like, a lot of people were like, this is the last year for Bonds, this is the last year for Schilling and for Clemens, like, what are they gonna do? And I think that the writers just wanted, I kind of think that they just wanted to piss some people off and just vote for very specific people and not just vote for it as a whole. I don't know. I think like with the whole lockout scenario, like those guys don't know if their jobs are going to be around, hopefully, but like, I don't know. I feel like they just didn't put as much thought into it or much emotion.
Last Hall of Famer, actually there's 2 more Hall of Famers I want to focus on here, but one that I just completely do not understand where the voters are coming from, and I'm actually going to mention 2. I'm sorry, I lied to all of you. Alex Rodriguez got 34.3% of the vote. So, do the Hall of Fame writers not remember his year suspension and the somewhat criminal acts that he was committing while trying to hide his steroid use?
Well, yeah, and like with that being said too, it's like he also doesn't get along with the media that well, but like some people still really like him. I'm not the biggest fan of him personally, but I think that he's like tried to amend that and tried to make people forget about all his past. He like started becoming a broadcaster, and like I'm not the biggest fan of when he's on MLB TV or like ESPN. I don't know. I just don't think he's that good of a caster.
I would absolutely agree. And then the other one, I'm not sure if you know who Jeff Kent is. He was a...
Yeah, I know who Jeff Kent is.
Yeah, he was a second baseman for the Houston Astros. He only got 32% of the vote. He is the best power hitting second baseman of all time in my belief. I believe he hit close to 400 home runs. I think he finished his career with 377. And for me, that just means my favorite player of all time, Chase Utley, is not going to get into the Hall of Fame, even though I firmly believe that he is a Hall of Famer. And then you look at Jimmy Rollins, who got 9.4% of the vote, played beside Chase Utley during those 2008 Phillies teams that won the World Series. They went to the World Series, lost the NLCS against the Giants, and then fell apart in 2011 against the St. Louis Cardinals. That Cardinals series still hurts. But I think he'll have a rise like Scott Rowland did, and like we said earlier, I'm not sure why Rowland is getting all these percent of the votes. I know he was absolutely fantastic on defense. He had a ton of Gold Gloves. How many Gold Gloves did he have?
One thing I want to bring up about Jeff Kent is that I think he gets really overshadowed by Barry Bonds on his early 2000s Giants teams. Like, I think of those teams, and I'm like, okay, there's Barry, and then there's Jeff Kent, and then there's, like, I can't remember anybody else.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that when you're one of the two best players in the league at that time, like with Bonds, helping Bonds try to get to a World Series, I don't know. I think Jeff Kent deserves to get in.
Yeah, and some other notable names falling off the list: Joe Nathan, Tim Hudson, Tim Lincecum, which was very surprising. He was dominant in the 2010s. Ryan Howard, who had one of the best 5-year spans of any first baseman of all time. I'm a little bit biased because, Phillies. He's my guy. He's my first baseman. Mark Teixeira, Jonathan Papelbon, good riddance, Jonathan Papelbon. Justin Morneau, A.J. Przinsky, Prince Fielder, who would have had a Hall of Fame career if it wasn't for his injuries.
That just upsets me so much. Like, anytime I hear about that, okay, so I wasn't into baseball until about, two years ago. Like, I got really into it during the pandemic. The only baseball player I knew before that was Prince Fielder. I turned on a game when I was, 10, and I just, turned on the TV, and baseball was on, and it was when Fielder was playing for the Tigers. And, the very next pitch, he just, hit the furthest baseball I've ever seen against the Rockies when he was playing for Detroit. And that was, one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Because I was like, that man is huge, and he has that much power, and he's just, hilarious. So I, still have a little, standee of Prince Fielder, just absolutely clobbering one. But then, sorry for cutting you off, but I just want to talk about, the Tim Lincecum thing. I think the only reason that he won't get in is because I just don't think his longevity was that long. He won the Cy Young. Didn't he win it back-to-back years?
I believe so. Let's see. He was a 2-time Cy Young Award winner. Yes, back-to-back years.
Yeah, I just think that for the prime that he was in, it just wasn't. I just don't think it's long enough for him to get in the Hall of Fame. If it was only just a couple years later, because he did get a ring with those. I think it's the 2014 Giants.
2010. They won 3: 2010, 2012, and 2014. Okay. So he was pretty stacked there.
But I think the 2010 one was one of his worst years with them.
Oh, I'm not sure. I mean,
he had a 4 ERA or something.
Let's look here. Tim Lincecum. I know he won the back-to-back. I believe it was 2008 and 2009 is when he won the 2 Cy Young Awards back-to-back years. Let's see, 2010 here, he was an All-Star. He went 16-10 and had a 3.43 ERA. That was one of the higher ones for his prime. He also had a 5.18 ERA in 2012.
Yeah.
So, he was a 4-time All-Star, back-to-back years. An interesting career, a good career. I'm sure the Giants will honor him in some way, just like how the Phillies will probably honor Ryan Howard, and the Tigers and perhaps the Brewers will honor Prince Fielder.
They have to.
All these players have to be honored in some way. I mean, I can remember Prince Fielder coming in and hitting a walk-off home run, and then he jumps on home plate, all his teamates fall over, and he's just standing there with his arms out. I mean, it's fantastic. He brought the game another type of entertainment, and that's what it's really all about for these players in the Hall of Fame. And it's tough to judge who is and isn't a Hall of Famer, but right now I don't think the writers know one way or the other.
No, they don't, and I just think it's just a back and forth of just well, he deserves to be in, well, he doesn't. It's just I don't know. You finally debate about an issue for so long, and then it finally comes down to the wire, and you're like, they gotta let him in, and then they don't, and you're like, are you serious? You took all this time just to debate this issue, and then you just don't let him in. It just really upsets me, and then even with the NFL, sometimes they'll elect a dude into the Hall of Fame after he dies, and I'm like, are you serious? Really? It took you that long to decide about it? Hall of Fame's just upset me sometimes. I think the only Hall of Fame that doesn't is the Basketball Hall of Fame. Basketball
Hall of Fame, yeah, that's a pretty good one. They've elected a lot of people in recent years, but I also wanted to mention the only piece of Barry Bonds memorabilia in the Baseball Hall of Fame that will ever mean anything is the 756 home run ball, which is stamped with an asterisk. The amount of pride that you must take away from someone from stamping such a historic ball. That's the all-time home run ball right there. I mean, now it's like 763, but it's stamped with an asterisk.
Yeah.
That's incredible to me. And, you know, you can make your points about it, but ultimately they have to tell the story of this. And, you know, some people think that it should be passed down onto the players to vote. I personally think there should be a separate wing. There should be a completely separate wing of the Hall of Fame for the 90s guys who cheated that tells their story and memorializes them there, but, you know, you tell the full story.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will say, you know, Bonds and Clemens were Hall of Famers before they took steroids. At some point, that doesn't matter. Shoeless Joe Jackson was a Hall of Famer before he, you know, he kind of ruined his own thing. You can argue he hit 400 during that 1919 World Series. There's no way he could have been throwing those games, and he's been banned. Pete Rose, Hall of Famer before he bets on baseball. The writers look for your merit.
Yeah.
And that's what's excluding these guys from the Hall of Fame, and I think it just needs to be preserved in a separate wing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So we're going to move on here to a sort of lighter topic now. We're going to talk about a guy who I thought was very interesting. He is not in the Baseball Hall of Fame, but he was a baseball player. His name is Ray Caldwell. Now, have you ever heard of this guy?
I've not.
So he is perhaps on the greatest graphic of all time. This is one of my favorite baseball stories, and he played for Cleveland in 1919. And Caldwell was pitching for the Cleveland, and they were playing the Philadelphia Athletics in League Park in Cleveland when it started to lightly rain in the fourth inning. Now, that's no big deal. If you can play through some rain, and as long as it doesn't get too serious, like the 2008 World Series in Game 5 where they had to suspend it, and then they came back, and, you know, it was lucky my Phillies won the World Series. But, you know, that being said, I don't think Ray Caldwell wanted to be in Cleveland right now. He had just been released by the Red Sox and was pitching in his first game back with Cleveland. Now, Caldwell was known for a good spitball. You know, you ever seen a spitball come at you?
Yeah, isn't it like, because like that was before all the outlaws of like the, because they had like the spitball. Well, that was before they like, it was like the dead ball era stuff.
Oh yeah, they'd scuff the baseball. They'd do all kinds of things to it to make it move in crazy ways. And Caldwell, he was kind of doing that. So, you know, the spitball, it's coming at you. That's his pitch. Now, anyways, he had pitched a great game, and it was common for pitchers to throw complete games during this time. Anything less than that would call into question your manlyhood. Now, could you imagine that today?
Nah, I couldn't. I know like old Hoss Radbourne, like I know about him, and like
great story.
62 win season and like almost 500 innings, and I'm just like, man's arm, was it not off of his body? Like, I don't know, the amount of stress that these guys put on it. Well, that's the era before all of the medical enhancements and all.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
You know, all the dieting and stuff. Like, that's why I hold like older athletes like such a high regard. Like Wilt Chamberlain's like my favorite basketball player of all time, who's hooping in Converse, like Chuck Taylor's. Like,
but, you know, old Hoss Radbourne, you know, he couldn't even lift his shoulder after that. So Caldwell, he's pitching. Cleveland picked up Caldwell because they had some problems with pitchers early in the season. Maybe if, you know, they would have realized, oh, our guys are having arm problems, then they would have probably had some pitchers. But Caldwell was brought in to keep them in the race with the White Sox, who we just mentioned, Shoeless Joe Jackson, 1919. They would eventually go on to throw the World Series. Very, very infamous story. And so, yeah, Caldwell is on the mound. They're winning 2-1 in the fourth inning. It's just lightly raining. You know, the rain's coming in from Lake Erie off of the lake there in Cleveland, you know. And Caldwell, he's just 3 outs away. He goes back out in the ninth inning, and he's 3 outs away from the win. So he gets the first 2 batters out. You know, he's like, all right, let's get going. The rain's coming here. And so he's getting ready to pitch, and then all of a sudden, it gets quiet. Boom! He gets rocked with lightning. He gets knocked out by lightning. Now, they say it goes through the button on his cap and down out through his metal spikes. Now, he got struck by lightning. I mean, if that happens to any normal person, you're probably dead.
Yeah.
So, it says here, Harry P. Edwards wrote in the Sporting News, the bolts flashed here and there, causing much excitement, and there was a blinding flash that seemed to have set the diamond on fire, and Caldwell was knocked out from the shock of it. He laid stretched out in the pitcher's box, and his teammates feared that he may have been killed. So the umpires said that they could all feel the shock in their legs, and some players reported they could also feel the electric currents from their spikes that they were wearing. Fans at this point had scattered. They were terrified. There was also metal, and if it was said if you touched the metal, it would shock you. So the lightning was aplenty, and still alive. Caldwell's still alive somehow. His teammates are walking up to him. They feel the electric current in their body. So Caldwell gets up, picks himself up from the dirt. He does a quick inventory of his arms and legs, and he's relieved. Everything was still attached. Can you imagine standing up on a baseball diamond after being struck by lightning?
Well, yeah, it's like, how does he even remember what just happened? Like, you got knocked out cold by nature.
You see it nowadays. The most recent incident I can think of is when the Lightning and the Thunder rolled in over Texas when they were still playing in their old ballpark, and all the players just scatter off the field. It's like they're cats running away as fast as they can. No. So Caldwell, picks himself up. One of his teammates touched him on the head and leaped into the air because, he was crackling with electricity, just head to toe. And a lot of people said, is this possible? So it says, when lightning strikes the ground, the current flows across the surface, creating a steep voltage. Someone standing with their feet apart can have the current go up one leg and down the other. Joseph Dwyer, a lightning researcher and professor of physics at the University of New Hampshire, said, and he said he thinks it would cause such a large current through the legs, and it could explain the numbness that he felt afterwards. He was completely numb. So he's knocked out for 5 minutes. He gets up, he's a fireball, essentially. And so what does everyone do next? They go back and take their positions. They got to finish this game. There's 1 out away, and Caldwell gets a ground out. The game is over. It starts absolutely pouring. He had pitched a complete game against the Philadelphia Athletics. He allowed only 1 run and 4 hits. He struck out 3 and walked 2. So after the game, Caldwell tells the Cleveland press that the lightning strike felt just like someone came up with me in a board and hit me on the top of the head and knocked me down. So, yeah.
That's like the most, I don't know, when you hit your head on something, when you're just working, then you just there's something above you and you just go dunk. That's the most irritating pain I've ever felt. And that imagine just somebody just going and then you just get the next guy out. It's nothing big. No big deal.
So he had a few burns on him, and then 17 days later, he threw a no-hitter in New York. So he was good. And then he also won 20 games for Cleveland in 1920 when they won the World Series. He started Game 3, but recorded just 1 out, having given up 2 hits, a walk, and an earned run, and he was lifted by Tris Speaker. Cleveland did not come back from this, and Caldwell was charged with the loss. So kind of a better end of the story there. But, it's just insane. The fact that he was struck by lightning, revived, won the game, then pitched a no-hitter, and then won a World Series with Cleveland.
Yeah.
That's just a great story. And let's give it up for Ray Caldwell. What a legend. And what do you think of that?
That's a legend.
Yeah, that's the only word for it. He is a legend. And so now, as we're going to close out the show here, we got 3 minutes left. On this date, this is a segment that we like to do here on the show. On this date, 1894, the first college basketball game between the University of Chicago and the Chicago YMCA ended in a 19-11 final score.
It's 30 points put up by both teams, pretty good for back then.
They were shooting underhand. They had bread baskets as the hoops.
Peach basket. Yeah.
The scoring was not as plentiful as it was today.
Yeah.
But yeah, on this day, that's pretty cool. The first college basketball game. And then the second on this day that we have is the Philadelphia Phillies traded shortstop Larry Boa and infielder Ryan Sandberg to the Chicago Cubs for second baseman Ivan DeJesus. This is, in my opinion, the worst trade ever because as a Phillies fan, Ryan Sandberg played in 13 games for the Phillies. He got 1 hit, and then he got 2,000 more with the Cubs. And Ivan DeJesus did, not much for the Phillies. And Ryan Sandberg Larry Boa, he was a great player as well. He had, I think, 11% of the votes to get into the Hall of Fame in like the early 1990s. I recently just met him at a Arizona Fall League game. Great guy to talk to. Very animated guy. And yeah, and there is the story of the Phillies and the Athletics letting down Philadelphia baseball. It's been happening for over a century, people. And now we're going to close out a show. I'm going to ask you a trivia question.
All right.
This is a tough one. Zach Wargo, he got 2 last week. He answered Bill Walsh and then Don Shula were the 2 coaches in Super Bowl 19. I made this one a lot harder.
Okay.
So I will tweet this out on my Twitter at JacksonWebster26. Jackson is spelled Jaxson. I know it's a weird spelling, but here we go. What 17-year-old girl playing for the Chattanooga Lookouts in 1931 struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig back-to-back in an exhibition match?
What?
Yeah.
That happened?
So she struck out both of them in succession and then walked the next hitter and was pulled. And yeah, that was her professional baseball career.
Dude, I have no idea.
That's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be hard. So if any of you know, make sure you tweet it at me at JacksonWebster26. I'm tallying up the points. Zach Wargo has 2 right now. So if you find the answer later, and I don't care if you Google it, it's all good. I don't care. You can tweet it at me after I tweet out the question, and you will be added to the points board. I'm not sure what the winner will win yet, but they'll win something. We'll bring them in on the last episode. We'll give them a prize, and it'll be fun. And yeah, that's all I got. Anything else you want to say?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.
But yeah, so my name's Aidan Hansen. I am also the host of Real Talk on Blaze Radio every Mondays at 9.
Go listen to it. It's a good show.
Yeah, and you can follow us on Twitter at ASU Real Talk. Real Talk is REEL. So.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here today on Weird with Webster. Make sure you tune in next Thursday from 2 to 2:30, and we'll catch you all then.